Hi there, and welcome to Cybersecurity Council of Arizona and our event for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, a cybersecurity career conversation. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm so glad to see everyone make it today. From a logistics standpoint, we ask that everyone remain muted until called upon, just to help with some of the audio challenges that can be a web event. And as you're advised, we are recording this event. We might turn off recording later during the questions and answers segment. But I want you to know that we do ultimately want this to be an interactive experience. It's a place for dialogue. Let's see. And I want to open with a big happy celebration. Congratulations for our Madam VP-elect Kamala Harris. She represents a lot of big firsts for for women, for Black people, for South Asians, for immigrants, and there's a lot that she's accomplished already in her career. And I know that there's still some counting to be done, but it looks like what we have going forward is Biden-Harris, and both of them also present a first in that they are the first officials elected to the White House who didn't attend an Ivy League university. So I think there's some trailblazing happening there. So big congrats to Madam-elect Harris. And as I mentioned, you're at Cybersecurity Career Conversations, and we're focusing today on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm so glad you all made it. I want to thank our sponsor one more time. Semiconductor has been very generous, and they're the reason we have our WebEx today. So give you an idea of the agenda. We're going to do intro and announcements. That's me. We'll talk about how this is a brave space, who we are as CC of AZ, talk about a couple of programs that are in our market, and lay some groundwork on what is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then we'll have a presentation from Gail Ricketts, and then a presentation from Sharifa Rowe, and we'll do a Q&A panel as well. But that said, both Gail and Sharifa and myself too, we want this to be a dialogue. And so once I hand over everything to them, I'll be keeping an eye on chat so that I can could raise a hand and let her know if there's questions throughout. Everyone's going to try to take a pause to make sure if there's any questions that they can be addressed. We really want this to be a dialogue. So CC of AZ, we're a group of women that started as a study group. We started in Burton Bar Library back in 2026. We started with a Security Plus study group, and we've grown from there. We've seen people successfully achieve their Security Plus, but also advance in their career. And I want to let you know, too, about a free program if you are looking to get into cybersecurity and trying to find your way there. Apprenti is launching in Arizona. It's a proven model from the Pacific Northwest. There is no experience required and no fee to job seekers. It offers free training, and it is a paid internship as well. So it's a pretty unique program, but it is just getting started. So it's not going to be next month that you get into that role, but it is something that is available to you. So go and check that out. And then coming up in December is a free event that I'm helping to put forward, and it's DevSecOps Days Southwest. If you're interested in the application side, software security, I think this is a great opportunity to learn more and hear those types of conversations. Also, if you have a topic you want to present and get on your soapbox about or help others learn, there's still time to submit your talk too. So go to devsecopsdays.com/events to look up the Southwest event, and you'll be able to learn more there. And we are looking for more people to get involved. We need people to help with social media. If you're interested in giving a talk, if you know someone, or if you have a topic that you're really interested in, please let us know. And then to speak to this being a brave space for conversation, it's a space for dialogue, for sharing questions and conversation. We're here to honor each other's humanity and create space for learning. We are operating from the position that racism is a real lived experience, and we're not here to convince anyone that anyone else's experience is real. We're here to ask and discuss questions in a collaborative space. We all have our own experiences and our own perspectives to share. And a quick couple of tidbits that I gleaned from an article that is not safe for work, but is pretty good, has a lot of good perspective to share. And just to start with, even if you don't see it, it's still real, it's still valid. Trust people of color's assessment of the situation. So if you didn't pick up something, then that doesn't necessarily mean it didn't happen. Don't assume that everyone of a certain color shares the same experience or views. You know, Gail and Sharifa might share different perspectives, but both of their perspectives are valid. And then also just a pro tip for life, never try to tell a person of color what is or isn't racist. And then, you know, I think this acronym gets thrown around a lot, and I probably see it more than anyone because I intersect in the HR space and human resources, and we use the acronym quite a bit, DEI, but specifically that stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And, you know, I think initially our conversations were always very focused on diversity and inclusion, and equity is about taking that into action and implementing. And there's been tons of studies on this. You can Google it, but here's a couple of big markers for that. But not only is diversity, equity, inclusion great for our interpersonal relationships, but it is also good for business in the bottom line. But, you know, a lot of the ways that we've implemented this in the past, we're focused on certain markers. And, you know, we've heard, I grew up during affirmative action, right? You know, and I know some of the critiques and successes of it, but what we're talking about is actually moving towards liberation and creating a space that's access for everyone, and that there are not barriers in place. So that's kind of what we're talking about in this conversation, is that next step of where equity can take us. So a little bit of a quick reminder, there's a lot of text on this page, but it's almost human nature to respond. You know, if someone says, hey, what you said was racist, or what you said kind of hurt, it's, you know, it's our instinctual to get defensive and to deny, and then quite often attack the other person, like, oh, they didn't understand, or, you know, why do you always do this? It's very easy to then revert the victim and offender and blame the other person. It's almost an emotional defense, right? But that's the exact opposite. And so taking some time and taking a breath to then choose to respond differently rather than react, respond, right? So begin with apologizing, listening to what they have to say, and using it as an opportunity to learn. And it was a lot of text and a lot to cover in a short space, but just kind of trying to give us all a reminder of how we're going to go into this conversation together. So that's a brief run through to get us started. Now I want to introduce Gail, who's going to share some of her experiences with us. I'm going to turn off my screen sharing here. And you'll receive me, nice little wave. And so I think I might need to give Gail access to be the host, which means I have to find her little box. There you are.
And Rachel and Sharifa, did either of you take my slides to put it into your deck?
I did not take your slides, but I do have them in my email, and I can pull them up if you'd like.
Would you? Because I could find them, but you know what my laptop's like.
You have a lot of big things happening in your laptop.
Yes, and it's been a very busy day.
It has been a Monday for sure.
For sure.
All right.
So while Rachel's pulling that up, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Gail Ricketts, and I have been in technology since 2000, and actually it's 1998. I entered Ford Motor Company's IT audit group in 1998. I later sat for my Certified Information Systems Audit certification from CISA in 2000 and became certified. Then I sat for my information systems in security and risk in, I believe that was 2016. And I am now certified to teach them both. But at my employer, I am a manager of information security and risk on Semiconductor. I chair, or should I say, I co-chair the Cybersecurity Council of Arizona. I'm the chairperson for the Black Employee Network Affinity Group on Semiconductor. I'm a director on the Phoenix One Foundation for the Phoenix Union School District. And I am also the co-founder and owner of Insider Insight. And just today, I became a member of the board for the Cybersecurity Education Consortium at ASU. So let's talk about bringing an affinity group to life. On Semiconductor started affinity groups back in 2014. We became the number 5 or the 5th affinity group for On Semiconductor and went live in July of 2019. But previous to that time, one of the questions I received from several different executives, including the senior executive of our human resources group, and that's because he lives in my neighborhood, why is it that they did not have a Black employee affinity group? And he asked me, would I be interested in standing one up? So I went to the group of people that we met once a month for lunch. There were 8 of us. Talked to them a little bit about what a Black employee affinity group would look like, what their expectations were, and began to create the foundation of the group. And in July of 2019, we launched it in 3 different sites for On Semiconductor. Now, to give you some indication how that worked, On Semiconductor is a global organization with 35,000 employees. We have several locations throughout North America, including Canada. We're in Asia Pacific, as well as the European states as well, or countries as well. But we stood one up for Phoenix, which is where our headquarters is. And then we stood one up in Rochester, New York, where one of our manufacturing plants are. And then one in Sunnyvale, California, where one of our design and engineering sites are. And we're all part of the same affinity group, but we call them satellites, so that where we have Black employees located, we have a satellite group to ensure that their site is brought into the recognition, evaluation, and celebration of Black employees. So once I was asked to spearhead the group, my first question was, what's my budget? So for the first year in 2019, we had a $5,000 budget. And that's mostly because we started in July, so a lot of the larger events had already passed. Martin Luther King's birthday, Black History Month, Juneteenth, a lot of significant and memorable holidays to the Black community. So we took that $5,000 and very handily, with the assistance of the 2 other site coordinators, did some work around the 19th Amendment. We did a little bit around Kwanzaa. So we took that $5,000, and most of what was done was homemade and homegrown. The second year, the budget got a little bit bigger. It went to $51,000, but at that point, we were able to adopt a school for underrepresented kids in each one of our neighborhoods. And here in Phoenix, we adopted the Paul Dunbar Lawrence School. This year, we were able, with our $51,000, to stand up a STEAM room for them. And also in Rochester, we did a donation to an underrepresented high school class to help fund some robotics in their school. And then in the Sunnyvale environment, we decided to combine our Sacramento, Sunnyvale, and San Jose sites together And we did some contributions to local food banks for different schools of underrepresented kids. We also this year were able to take part of that budget and buy one school uniform for each child at each one of the schools that we partner with, and that includes socks and shoes. And then we also did a back to school supplies drive on a Benevity website. On Semiconductor matches whatever amount, no, not whatever, $25 or more on Semiconductor matched that donation by employees, and we raised a little over $7,000, and that was including on Semiconductor's contribution. One of the other things we looked at, especially after May the 25th, the first thing that my company did, my CEO, was to reach out to our global communications and marketing team, who reached out to me and asked if I would read an email that he was creating to send to all employees about racial injustice and what his view and his company's view is on that topic. And I was very honored that they thought of me. I seem to be the one who's the driving force on involving my company in Black America and the struggle to make sure that there's equity in our own work environment, because it was a big change, not just in America, but in the companies, the boardrooms, and across the world. So from that, I was asked, how would I feel about standing up an HBCU scholarship program, because my company wanted to do more. So I did a little bit of research on scholarship programs. We are an innovator in energy solutions. So when it comes to sensors and different boards, most people don't know there are about 80,000 products in which some part has been made by On Semiconductor, because our name is not on the product. It's inside and what makes the product work, whether it's medical, automotive, IoT, what they call soft goods, meaning washers, dryers, all those things. So one of the things I did was to identify different schools that had the top programs and graduates for engineering, sales, financing, and human resources. I presented to our CEO and his staff a plan, and the On Foundation, which was a spinoff from the On Semiconductor Global Corporate Giving Program, so that it could become a not-for-profit program, because we do donate a little over $40 million a year, at least we have in the last few years, to community projects. So they sponsored me with $100,000 a year, although my CEO keeps telling me I need more money, which I probably will, but I wanted to start off small. And with the help of our talent and acquisition team and our diversity and inclusion department, they're helping me to stand up these scholarship programs. The senior VP of HR has also committed that if we grant an HBCU student a scholarship, they are also immediately given an internship if they choose to come and do their internship here at On Semiconductor. We're creating a mentorship program, because one of the things the board of director for the On Foundation thought that those students would need some mentorship and some guidance and some support to make sure that they were successful. So one of the things I did was I created 2 subcommittees under the Black Employee Affinity Network. One, to stand up a mentorship program for all HBCU scholarship awardees, and then the other to develop a Black leadership development program for the Black employees that we have it On Semiconductor. And while I can't remember my mission by heart, we at the Ben, one of our missions is to ensure that we are fostering an environment that's conducive to recruitment, retention, and career advancement of all Black employees On Semiconductor. And we're also committed to promoting On Semiconductor's brand in the emerging market penetration for Black products. So I'm working with my sales group to identify different products in different industries, like whether it's health, automotive, to see where those innovators are, those companies are, to get them aware of what it is on Semiconductor can help to build to make their product more efficient. So I'm working with sales and marketing on that as well. A couple of other things that we found out in the last week. The first year was a $5,000 budget. The second year was a $51,000 budget. And when I put in our budget for this year, I made it $156,000. So far, 101 of it has been approved. And with that money, what we're going to do is to go out to different HBCU colleges, to job fairs, to the NSBE, which is the National Black Engineering Group. Twice a year, we'll be going to their conference. And what I wanted to do was to give students here in Phoenix and Rochester and California an opportunity to see what an HBCU campus is like. So what I secured some extra funds for was to identify one student planning to attend college and a chaperone from their school, so they could accompany us on those job fairs so they can get a feel for what a HBCU campus is like and help them or guide them towards where it is they want to attend school. And then another thing that our affinity group is doing is we are vetting a couple of more underrepresented students and their elementary and high schools within the cities that we operate to start to donate some additional funds and assistance to other schools that are in need. Paul Dunbar Lawrence School is the first Black elementary school here in Phoenix back in the 1800s. And that particular school represents about 49% of their population are Black students who are under or at the poverty level. And there are some schools that are in the same position, not just here in Phoenix, but across the United States. So we're looking to expand our reach. We built the STEM room at Paul Dunbar Lawrence and the bioscience and Phoenix Code Academy. I'm starting to work with them and getting them introduced to the people at ASU to help them apply for loans and grants to supplement their STEM budget. So a lot of the work that I've done is more putting people together. I've done some fundraising. We do an AI for All summer camp these last 2 years. I did this before I started the Black Employee Network, in which I convinced our STEM chairperson, Nahal Shah, and I have to thank her every time I see her, to sponsor this camp with $25,000 each year. And in 2021, she's agreed to sponsor it again, but I'm going to add a $10,000 from my Black Employee Network budget, because one of the things that I wanted to do was to ensure that we have girls and we have children of color and we have underrepresented kids, we have low income kids. The first year, and that was an in-person camp, there were 39 students. One did not show up, but out of those 39 students, 22 were female. And that, to me, the diversity of that group and the opportunity that those students received was tremendous. And I actually keep in touch with a lot of their parents now, and they explained to me how it was so influential in their decision on what they were going to pursue for college. So it's been very rewarding. This past year, we had 22 students. It was all virtual, but the kids were just as excited with the virtual program as they were with the in-person. But I like to advocate for kids and kids that are underrepresented and need that extra support. And one of the things Ben does is we collaborate with each of the other, there's now 6 affinity groups at On Semiconductor. So they'll come into the school and help with after school programs. And unfortunately, we're pushed back now till January when Phoenix will be going back into the classroom. We hope. But I've collaborated with STEM Up, that's an affinity group, Continua, which is our LGBTQ group, with Cultivate, which is our generational, multi-generational group. And now I'm working with the veterans group and putting them in contact with ASU for internships. So the Black Employee Network does a lot, and I'd have to say the majority of it I've done. But in July of next year, I'll be stepping down and the new chair will take control. And some of the things I've done for him is to ensure that he's got not just one executive sponsor, because Chuck Spinner, the only Black executive at Semiconductor here in Phoenix, is now our current executive sponsor, but I've identified 2 other executive sponsors that will help to guide the HBCU scholarship and mentorship program, as well as getting out there and sending their managers and their directors to these different job fairs and conferences to be there to do interviews, because it's important that they're on the ground. And it's not just me, because I have to tell you, everything I've done internally, I'm probably the only person in the last 2 years that have gone to any of these job fairs or conferences. They've always asked me to go and I've always gone. So now I had to stand up a group to help expand that reach, because I can only do so many things at a time.
Very true. Gail, you are a powerhouse, and one of the things I like about your story is that there's such a variety of things that you've accomplished with the support of the leadership and the monetary support as well. I think, those different things that you've done, a company or a person could pick one of those things to kick a program, right? So, by sharing such a dynamic story, it gives a lot of different ideas for other people. And then,
there's so many directions that you can go in. Absolutely.
yeah, and we did have a lot of good comments. Haley said awesome, and Sharifa said I
She's
love the
prejudiced. I know Haley. She's prejudiced. So.
Some of the side, like I've heard the story, but there were some new details in there that I was pretty impressed by. And then I believe it's Moose that said, "Congratulations, Gail, on your achievements and support on minorities' causes. Thank you, CCVZ, for creating this space and making this happen. This matters." So thank you, Moose. I appreciate that.
Oh, that's right. Did I say I sat on this board too? I did.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay.
You did mention that.
Sometimes I lose track of them. Sorry.
Well, and then you're also a certified instructor for your profession. It's a technical instruction, and yeah, you're a powerhouse, Gail. I'm honored to know you. What other questions we might have? Oh, we're hearing Brittany said, "Thank you so much for sharing, Gail. The work you have done is incredible and very important." Thanks, Brittany. Are there any questions? Any questions for Gail? I muted myself because my audio was being obnoxious. But let's see. Let's take off. I'm going to turn off sharing. And then let's see if there's not other questions right now. Maybe it's time for Sharifa to take the wheel. Are you able to share your screen, Sharifa, or do you want to send me your slides?
Copy meeting link. No, it doesn't say I can share.
Yeah, I'm noticing
When
that
it
there's
can,
some of the features that we had when we did the test run.
If you right click her name, I believe you should be able to.
I think it's not showing up with the right click. I wonder if it's because I went on browser
okay.
instead of in the.
Well,
Oh,
I
maybe,
am
yeah.
putting it in the link, and people can open it if they want, but you can also,
I'll do the sharing too.
um,
Oops.
can people put their name and their kind of what made to an equity conversation type of meeting in the chat? Like, what would make this time valuable for you? What are you wondering about, or what made you interested in coming here today? You can just put your name, since I can't see everyone's face, just your name and kind of what brought you here.
Also, Luz had a really good question. She said it could be a challenge to know how to contribute effectively as someone without much experience. What would you recommend?
Is that for me, Rachel?
Yes, I think so. And now I think I can see the sharing piece too.
Well, what I would suggest is that you provide support. One of the things that it took me a while to develop was we started with a group of 10. We're now up to a group of 27. But getting people to become active and support efforts was the most difficult thing. What I found, though, was I kind of put people on the spot and I reminded them what they're good at and asked them if they would share their time either by doing coordinating, because that's what a lot of what I do is coordinate, but I get others to execute and explain to people. Even giving your ideas and your suggestions are helpful. And I think I've had at least 3 people tell me this year, with everything that's going on and with the HBCU scholarship program, the Black Leadership Development Program, it has spurred their interest in wanting to help. So people sometimes won't step up until they see results because they don't want to be put on the spot or made to look inefficient. But even if you ask for an hour of their time, start out small and give them things to be responsible for. That helps to move the needle.
Gail, I just read your answer. You said my name's Gail Ricketts and Rachel asked me to be here. but also but also learning more what people think DEI means to them. I thought that was
Yep.
a nice answer. And I'll also add too, as one of the things you shared in our conversation, Gail, is that in the beginning, you did need to establish your knowledge, right? You needed to
Absolutely.
show, especially in your professional career, you had to establish that you knew what you were doing and you had that knowledge. And then you also shared that you had an ally, and there was an ally
Absolutely.
in the office that said, no, Gail knows what she's talking about and how much
Right.
that makes a difference. So finding your allies in the office.
Oh, absolutely. If it wasn't for my senior VP of HR, I don't think anyone would have asked me to tackle this. One of the things people, or I am known for, is that I am an analytical and knowledgeable person, and that sometimes puts people off, but it does not stop me from displaying my knowledge and my skill. And for those who don't know me, that's the first thing that I have to set those boundaries, is for them to understand I am not, a by night kind of person, and I'm not going to be in an organization or take on a task or give you an assessment, evaluation, or my opinion based on what I think. I'm going to do it based on what's good for the company and what is industry standard. So I get tested on that a lot and still do these days. But I just have to keep repeating it, so it's become second nature.
Um, I think we can start if you have this is a very different environment for me. because I'm used to seeing people's faces, and this conversation is normally a very much an interaction. So that's why I was asking people to kind of share their ideas in the chat, so that I could just kind of get a feel of how much to share. But Rachel and Gail reached out to me to help start having this conversation. My name is Sharifa Rowe. I help people have strategic conversations about racial justice and equity and how to change systems around equity and liberation. I think that's the second slide where I am, so people can see me. So yeah, that's me. So I consider change rooted in Jedi, which I refer myself as a Jedi, a person focusing on justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion work in all the fields. And so I want to kind of start with I kind of already done this, but I just want to reiterate that for you to take care of yourselves, to take deep breaths, to drink water. Remember, your body reacts first before the emotions. And I can't see anybody's face, so I don't really know kind of how you will react, but just notice your body. Or you might already be rooted in these type of conversations and be very comfortable. But I ask that you give yourself grace and recognize we're all on a journey, and that we've been socialized into this culture. And I appreciate Rachel sharing that Blackness is not a monolith, because even listening to Gail, we are coming at this from really different points of view, because Gail is a professional and very strong in her field, and I'm coming at it from a point of view of like, these systems are in place, how do we change them and look at them differently, and not necessarily do the thing that we have to survive in the systems. So I'm really excited that we were both on the same panel, so that you can see the same, hear the same, hear different experiences in this journey. To find equity, we use the policy link, and you can just go to the next slide. I wish I could get to the slides. I'm sorry. I feel like I can't move them, and you don't know when to move them. So this is the definition that we use from Policy Link. Equity, just and fair inclusion into a society in which all can participate, prosper, and reach their full potential. But you cannot talk about equity and not talk about racism. A lot of people want to have this conversation under different guises of like, yeah, but what about, LGBTQ, and what about people who are not able-bodied? And all those things are true. You definitely want to look at those things. But when you look at what has been rooted in what we've been socialized in, racism is definitely at the top. So we want to make sure that when you're looking at identifying race. So today's conversation, I borrowed this from, if you go to the next slide, I borrowed this from the Center Building on Race, Equity, Culture. This is like margins at the center, equity in the center. And they have this framework where they talk about becoming awake, getting woke, and going to work, and getting to work. And so at first, that awake phase is just really, it's kind of hazy. You're asking questions. You might feel a little confused. You might feel a little like, am I doing this right? And then, you get to a point where you're woke, you learning and interacting and with other people, and really being more self-reflective and learning information. And then you take that information and you get to work. How do you uproot systems? How do you do affinity groups? How do you, identify who are allies and change policies and practices within our work? And so this conversation is going to be connected to the awake phase of the work. We're kind of going to stay in this awake piece. And so anti-racist, we use this when we talk about learning new information. And so becoming an anti-racist is really connected to identifying that there is a fear there's a fear whenever you're learning something new. We often give the example of riding a bike. You know, you get on the bike for the first time, super excited because you want to ride this bike, and then you realize that you can fall and hurt yourself and scrape your knee or scrape your elbow, and it's like, wait a minute, do I really want to learn how to ride this bike? But as you keep on going and you learn to balance and you learn to pop wheelies, and then before you know it, you're, you know, able to ride in the street, and you're not nervous when cars come. And then before you know it, you're really growing. You can put your friends on the handlebars. You can ask them to get on the bike in the back. You can tell I have kids that are 9, 11, and 12 in my references, but you can really grow. You know, you start to grow and riding this bike and becoming an anti-racist, and these kind of this thing. You're constantly building the muscle. And so when you push out of the fear, you really get into learning and growth. And so we encourage you to do that and to know that it's okay to be afraid and to be a little nervous about this conversation. And so I want to pause for a second and see if there's anything that I've said or anything that you want to have, that you have a question about.
So we don't have any questions yet in the chat, but if somebody has a question that they would like to ask, this is a good time. And we can keep going too.
We have put these different pieces in for people to ask questions or if they had something that they wanted to share, but we can keep going. So how does this show up when we think about race, racism, when we're thinking about what it looks like? And I do this training with another colleague where we talk about, why is equity so squirrely? Why does it feel like it's a moving target? Every time you look up, it's like moved across the yard and now it's somewhere else and it's shooting and it's going in different places. Well, the reason why, and if you go to the next, because it really shows up in society in a bunch of different ways and they're all actively working at the same time. So you have individual level of racism, which could be internalized racism, kind of your private racial beliefs held by individuals. You have interpersonal, where who you're interacting with, right? It can exist there, how a person acts on their own racial beliefs. But then you also have systemic level of racism, which is connected to institutions and racial inequities within institutions and systems of power. And then you have structural racism, where those institutions kind of work in concert with each other to reinforce the norms of the individual institution. So it's happening on multiple levels and multiple times. What resources we recommend? And so that's why it can get really squirrely. Is that to people like multiple places?
Yeah, and I like that analogy too of it being squirrely, and you know, it's kind of hard to pin down, right? But it's because it's in so many different ways. That's why it's hard to pin down.
Yeah, and
I think the hardest one that I have, I'm sorry.
Ahead, Gail.
I was going to say the hardest one I've had to deal with in the workplace is interpersonal racism. And I think I was telling you and Rachel the story that when I launched the Black Employee Network group, the CIO said to his staff, and one of his staff members came back and told this to me, I thought we couldn't call them Black. So, you know, they had that, or should I say, he had that preconceived notion that he believed you could not call a Black person Black. And one of the things when I heard that was part of my presentation to the D&I committee or council when I went to set up or should I say, ask for funding for our affinity group, was I did some research on why people refer to themselves as either Black or African American. And what I found out from the Labor Statistics Board was that there are about 48.6 million Black people in the United States of America, not North America, but just the USA. And 10% of those are foreign born. So most people that I interact with refer to themselves as Black until they're in the corporate world where they start to identify as African American. So again, the interpersonal racism piece is the one I encounter on a regular basis, is their own beliefs of the Black community.
Thank you, Gail, for sharing that. I think that we've all probably not probably we've all also experienced institutional and structural racism. It's not that's happened, but I think it's also created in such a way around professionalism and access and those kind of things that we've probably experienced more institutional and structural racism interpersonal. Like I've never had anyone call me the N-word, but I do live in South Phoenix and I know that I was redlined to where neighborhood I live in. Because I didn't grow up here. So I know that there's times where I didn't get a promotion because of I was Black and a woman, or, but it was couched in things like, oh, you're not the right leader that we're looking for, or the right this that we're looking for. So that institutional and structural is something that we all experience. And so that's the point. Slide 11 is that we all experience it. No one is exempt. So we all have work to do around it. And so we like to do this activity called belonging and othering. And I think one of the reasons that this is a little bit difficult is because we didn't really create a norm that people had to put in their videos. And people are less likely to have a real strong conversation like this without like having some connection. So I'm just gonna rely on Gail and Sarah, who is with Consulting, and I'm going to use them to help us talk through this idea of belonging and othering. And so the belonging and othering slide shows in what ways in society we are given belonging. And so if you are male or masculine or female presenting, if you're male or white or have European heritage, heterosexual or able-bodied or credentialed, you've gone to college or you have multiple degrees, or you're young or considered attractive, or you're upper middle class or wealthy, English is your first language, or you're light or pale or fertile. That was a big one for me. A lot of people wanted to know when I was going to have a baby because I was married 8 years before I had children. Or if you are a non-Jew or in Christianity, you are given these privileges essentially, and in ways that you are allowed to belong. A Black woman, yes, there's days that I've had belonging. And so being fertile or growing up Christian or having English as my first language, or now being in the upper class, or even being credentialed, right? So these are ways that belonging or privilege can show up, and it is compounded, right? So the privilege can be compounded. So if a person is white, but they're also poor, or Black and also poor, it can be compounded in belonging or in oppression, depending on kind of where you are sitting in your identity. So when you think about belonging, Gail, Sarah, and Rachel, where do you identify on this chart? And this is not an exhaustive chart. There's not other.
Like, I guess before a really interesting role I'm in. I'm usually not a participant in a conversation. So I guess as a participant, I just, I want to encourage those that don't have your camera on to turn it on, because in order for us to feel vulnerable and really be able to share our truths, we kind of have to see each other, and so and to connect with each other in that way. So if you're able, I'd really appreciate if you could turn on your camera so I can be vulnerable and courageous in the space with you as a community. So for me, how do I belong? I'm female presenting. I am heterosexual. I am able-bodied. I am credentialed. I have a master's degree in social work. I'm young. In some spaces, it might be an othering, but I am young. I will be 39 on Thursday. Hello, everyone. I'll see you. Look at all these wonderful faces. Thank you so much.
Coming on. That's so good.
My husband thinks I'm attractive. I'm middle class. I am Latina, but I am a light-skinned Latina, and so that gives me a level of privilege. I am fair-skinned, and I am Catholic, and I have children, so I'm fertile. Do you want to go next?
Rachel, do you want?
Sarah?
I can go next. I'm female. I'm white of European heritage. I'm hetero presenting. I present able-bodied, even though I'm not either of those things, but I can pass. My boyfriend thinks I'm attractive. I I've lost my young credential, but I had that for a while. And I was raised, I think my parents worked very hard on equity, but I was raised very aware of classism. So I was taught how to present and how to mask in different class stratuses. And I was raised with Episcopalian upbringing, so standard Christian environment. So yeah, I have privilege in a lot of ways.
So I am heterosexual, able-bodied, credentialed. I have a master's degree along with 2 other certifications. Well, actually 4 certifications, sorry. I consider myself young. I am attractive, whether it's to my husband or anyone else who looks at me. I am upper middle class. I am light-skinned as a Black person, which also gives me privilege as a Black person. And I am a Gentile. I am not fertile, thank God.
Thank you, Gail. Thank you, Rachel. And thank you, Sarah. I'm so grateful to have you in this space. It's very true. In order to have these conversations, you have to be in community with each other. And even like being vulnerable is the only way that this work gets done. And so thank you for bringing that in the space. And so if we go to the next slide, there's other ways that we are also othered. And other can be if you're infertile, or if you're a Jew, or if you're dark skinned, or if English is a second language for you, or you're working class poor, or considered unattractive, or even what Lizzo has been dealing with. If you're on social media, everyone is questioning. So it can show up that way. If you are a person or non-literate, or even a person with disabilities or disabilities that are not visible, LGBTQ, or a person of color, or female, or gender deviant, where you are not in the binary, you don't present in current gender norms, which we often see in a lot of our trans communities or our queer communities. And so this is why a person can say, what are you talking about? I have privilege. I grew up poor. Or what are you talking about? privilege. I had to work for everything I had. And so that's why your privilege does not negate your oppression, and vice versa. Your oppression doesn't negate your privilege. And so in the space so that you can see each other's humanity and how it can, because it's happening at many different levels, like the 4 levels we talked about of how it shows up, but then it's also happening in these other levels of the way society rewards or welcomes or allows people to exist in their humanity based on these criterias. And so and into, I see someone said that's a difficult one. So there's some working assumptions that we want to provide for you. So no one is exempt, so we all have work to do. I said that. Go to the slide. So this is the dominant culture that is our norm in our society and workplace, and they must be unlearned and replaced. So what I'm going to show you is the dominant culture that we all currently work under. And characteristics of white supremacy culture, because I know a lot of people, when they see this, they say, oh, I'm not that person because I'm not part of the Ku Klux Klan, or I don't use the M word, or any of those things. But these are the characteristics, and that oftentimes is treated as professionalism, and dictate whether or not you're professional. If you're professional or not connected to these things. So the first is perfectionism. There's a sense of urgency. There can be defensiveness, quantity over quality, worship of the written word. If it's not written down, it doesn't exist. There's only one right way. Paternalism, the person who has maleness in the space. Either or thinking, power hoarding, fear of open conflict, individualism. That's a part of our American culture, right? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. We're all individuals. I'm the only one. Progress is bigger and more. I'm objective. So I don't see color, or I don't care yellow or green, even though we know there's not any green people. And nobody is those colors. And a right to comfort. So this is the current culture that we've all been socialized in, and we're rewarded when we keep it status quo. To encourage you to think about these new characters. And if you go to the next slide, I'm calling it 15 characteristics to reject white supremacy culture. And the first
Sharifa, can we pause quickly?
Yeah.
There was a question for you to describe right to comfort a little bit more on the last slide.
Sure. So we are often told that if we are uncomfortable with something, that we don't have to address it, because if it makes you uncomfortable, then you don't have to address it or have the conversation, and that we have this right to comfort, that if we are uncomfortable, then it is our right to get comfortable, and we can do whatever we need to do to create comfort for ourselves, even if it is to the detriment of the other person, or even the detriment of something different or acknowledging or growing. But we just learned that earlier, right? That you cannot grow or learn in comfort. Comfort, you have to be uncomfortable or experience discomfort to even learn something. We call it productive struggle, right? So when you're learning something new, it is uncomfortable. There is discomfort. And it's
That's
true
really
for every. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. That's really helpful. Thank you. You were saying, though, that that's true for every.
That's true for anything that you're learning, that you have discomfort is a part of the process. And so that right to comfort oftentimes it sabotages progress. And so, yeah, so one of the ways that we say practice a right to discomfort. When you are uncomfortable, say, oh, I'm uncomfortable, this is good. Normalize that it's good that you're uncomfortable and that you're either learning something or you're growing or you're doing something that is causing you to build a muscle towards something else. Make space for imperfection. Go ahead.
Sharifa, I think the way I look at it is I'm always the only person in the room that will ask the question, because most people, it makes them feel so uncomfortable that they might be considered, you know, illiterate or stupid or seen as, you know, not meeting the standard. And it's like, I always ask the question because I'd rather feel uncomfortable, but at least I know what I don't know and I need to find that out. So always be the one that asks the question. And when people ask questions, I always tell them there is no stupid question. Ask whatever question you need an answer to from me. Otherwise, how will you know?
Yeah. But because of that perfectionism, a lot of times people will wait. You've been in a meeting before where no one says anything, and then the one person who was the first to speak, now everyone's critiquing that one idea that no one even opened their mouth to speak. That is that is because of this space of perfection, and this space of like, oh, now I'm going to show you how, you know, smart I am, and imperfection, because you cannot create innovation and be perfect. It's impossible. You can't do something new and be innovative and create the world we want to see, that we need for, which is an anti-racist, more equitable, more just world. Practice perfection. We challenge you to have abundance thinking, instead of either or kind of quantity. Like, know that there's enough. Have an abundance thinking. Think quality over quantity. Value lived experience. Credentialed experience, it has its pluses, but it also can have its minuses if it's not rooted in experience. So value lived experience. We challenge you to practice humility and practice both and thinking, and share power. Be open to productive struggle and practice collectivism instead of hierarchy. And there's many ways to get to an end goal, and try out multiple ways, multiple pathways. Progress is what is most useful for all of humanity, that no one has to be devalued or set aside for the sake of the idea, that there's enough room to create progress, and do the thing that's going to be most useful to all of us. And try understanding multiple perspectives and reject defensiveness. I loved Rachel's slide where she said, just apologize. What was it? It was like, apologize. What was the 3 words that you gave him, Rachel, in the beginning?
Quiz me. Apologize, listen, and learn. I don't know if that shows. That might show when I pull that up, but yeah, and that wasn't me. That's somebody much wiser than me said that.
No, but I love it because it's someone was just sharing a book with me called I'm gonna mess it up. I can't remember the book, but it was a thing in there that said, what if you lived in a world that when people did something that was wrong or that hurt your feelings, that they just apologized, they reflected on it, and they said that they like what an amazing world that would be, you know, if people would just do that. Like, even thinking about it, it just makes my heart pitter patter. Because that's something that we all can do. And reject defensiveness. You know, even though I am a Black woman, there's times where I'm not, you know, I'm not Latino, and which is one of the reasons I invited Sarah Gonzalez here, because I believe this work has to be done in an intersectional way. And, you know, there's different lenses that I don't have that I'm constantly learning and figuring out how to unlearn all of the socialization that's happened to me around different things. So practice that right to discomfort. I love Erica said, yes, normalize it. Normalize being uncomfortable. Normalize rejecting defensiveness. Normalize rejecting kind of this culture that we've told to survive, and do it differently because we can. And so I want to leave you with these things. Structural racism exists, it's alive and well. Learning about and addressing structural racism is uncomfortable, but you can practice normalizing discomfort. To do this work requires self-awareness, self-reflection, and unlearning. Structural racism is baked into white culture. So if you do nothing, you will be practicing it. It's not like, yeah, you'll just be practicing it if you do nothing. And diversity and inclusion are insufficient to address structural racism. So even just having a diverse people at the table, or even just trying to create a culture that will include others, is not sufficient. Or even having a really strong and great program is not sufficient. It's a start, but it's never going to eradicate what we're up against. And addressing structural racism is central to creating a society where race no longer predicts life outcomes. So we know that this culture is harmful and toxic, and in fact, it affects and impacts all of us. And so I'm proud of all of you who wanted to come into this space and at least learn and listen and attempt to have this conversation, because this is where we are. This is what we need. And we have to be able to hear each other and see each other and be in space with each other and get it wrong too. Get it wrong, apologize, learn something different, and do better. So thank you. I think I have one slide. It says, oh, I wanted to give you some resources. Yes. One is Your Silence Will Not Protect You by Audre Lorde. She's amazing. She's an intersectional queer Black feminist. There was a podcast that I loved listening to called Seen on Radio, and it was called Seeing White. And they kind of went through the history of white and how white even came about. Me and White Supremacy. It's a journaling book by Layla Saeed. Am I saying her name right? I've never heard her say her own name. Sayad. Mindful of Race by Ruth King. She really talks about breathing and positive thinking and mindfulness, and where that fits in this idea of thinking about race. And Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire, which is also a book that was created back in the 60s or 70s. But these have been really great resources for me. And the last thing is rest and joy is an essential part of radical change. So find ways to have joy in this conversation. You see I have my little fun red heart earrings on for y'all today, even though we're in a pandemic. I got cute for y'all. And make sure that you're resting and that you're having joy and that you're learning about these things in a joyful way and giving yourself grace. Because it's really a part of radical change. We always talk about radical change is what's closest to you, not what's furthest from you. So whatever you're doing in your day-to-day, that is radical change. And so thank you for being in this space. Sarah, thank you for coming in this space with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sharifa. I really appreciate it. When you're talking about the culture of white supremacy, and it reminded me of one of the women who I've been following, and I was just looking. I wish I could remember her name versus just her mission. But then I was trying to look it up. But she started something called the NAP Ministry. And basically, and she's talking about reclaiming, especially for Black people and Black women, but for everyone. We talk about perfectionism and workaholism and that how it's ingrained in white supremacy, but reclaiming naps, reclaiming rest.
Yes.
We talk so much about self-care, but this is really just about the liberation that comes by the care of just taking the rest when we need it. And that's helped me better understand how, it can be easy to respond to the word white supremacy, right? But how it does affect all of us, and to do that work to address it. So there's a lot coming through on chat right now too. But I do want to go back. Lewis asked a question earlier, and I want to start with that question. There's a lot of thanks and applause for you, Sharifa, as well deserved. But the first question that came in a little bit earlier, what resources would you recommend to help build the confidence on becoming a leader and not let mistakes deter us? What helped you overcome struggles? And I think maybe you and Gail could share from this, and if somebody else has other things to share too.
I'll say that. Can you hear me? Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I would say that that even that idea of some people are leaders and some people are not is a lie. It is a lie that is rooted in what we just talked about of white supremacy culture. Everyone has leadership. I know that we are a very extroverted society where we value extroverts or people who are outward presenting versus inward presenting and reflective. But leadership is something leadership is something you're all born with. You have it already. And as you build in who you are and what it is that you are doing and what it is you're interested in saying, and you start to build that and figure out what that is, and of course your leadership grows and builds. But it's already in you. And so all I would just say is that you just have to start practicing what it is that you care about and what you have to say and how you want to exert it.
And I would say most people who feel they're good leaders sometimes or most times are not. It's those that influence us to make decisions and execute on things that are the leaders that we look up to. So I think from an introvert, and that would be me, because I am truly an introvert. I know I'm never by myself much, but I truly believe that you have to establish a connection with the people that you are either going to work with or lead. And when you have that personal connection and understand how they work as individuals, that helps you become a better leader, because you're leading to their persona and not your expectation of what they should accomplish, but what they can accomplish based on what skills they have to share, and make your efforts more rewarding. So don't think you're not a leader. Usually when you think you're not a leader, you are the leader. So whether it's you're standing at a chalkboard practicing, equations with your kids, or you're showing someone how to use a Xerox machine, you're a leader. You're showing somebody what needs to be done and how to do it. And that's what leaders do.
Gail, you reminded me of when we had, because we were all doing events around this before, right? But when we had our big formation event and we were, okay, we're going to formalize, we're going to do the nonprofit. And I'd served on a board for another nonprofit before. So I was kind of, in my mind, I was trying to facilitate this process. And I write all of these roles that I think we might need on the board. And get people to volunteer for the different roles. And then the last one is the chair. And I'm like, who's going to do the chair? And everyone just looked at me like, well, of course it's you. And I didn't picture myself as the chair of this organization. But by taking the action that I felt the group needed, and trying to listen and ask people, they saw me as that leader. So, I think your story helps remind me of that, Gail. Thank you.
Well, and I can share. It's just we have to recognize that we're all leaders. I mean, we're leading our own lives. We're making critical decisions that impact our livelihood and the lives of others just by our own leadership and how we show up in the world, right? And I think that we are the only ones that really at times impede ourselves from really showing up in our full potential. And we have these mental models, I like to call them gremlins. They're the gremlins in your mind, that really kind of create those roadblocks and keep you from really showing up. And, for the longest time, I kept thinking, because I would show up in spaces and I was always looked at as like, oh, there's that kid, and she's so young. You're so young. I remember when I started my career, there was a woman that pulled me to the side and said, if you're going to make it in this world, it's a man's world, Sarah. If you're going to make it, you got to put lots of makeup on, and you better put on a blazer because you look really young. They're going to tear you up. And so for the longest time, I've just really I held on to that mental model around, I'm so young, I can't do this, and they're not going to take me seriously. And so I started to ask myself, well, when am I going to be old enough? What age is old enough? And so I'm actively, every time that gremlin shows up, I'm actively trying to debunk that mental model, because it's really me that's creating it. It's really me that's putting up that barrier. And then I also really try to align myself and work with really strong, powerful women like Sharifa and Erica Glaze, who's also a colleague of ours, and she's on the line as well, that really help me see my own strength when I don't always see it. They help me see it. And so just actively trying to debunk your own mental models about yourself and who you are as a leader, because we all are. We're all leaders. We all are.
Yeah, so I wanted to apologize for earlier. I accidentally clicked on the power button. I was fidgety because of how I look. I'm working a graveyard shift in security, thankfully. And so I just didn't. Okay, that's okay. I'm just gonna show my face. But I wanted to apologize for earlier. But yeah, no leadership. It's just one of those things. Everybody kind of questions, and I understand about the young part. I'm not that young anymore, and I do wear the blazers just because you have to show what you are. It is a very male-dominated field, but within that, you still have to prove yourself in one way or another. And a lot of times you have to reach out for that help to get there. And so that's sort of like what I was trying to say. It's like the communication is key. And a lot of times not having those connections can sort of be a little bit harder. So I moved here from Denver, and I still, I'm part of a lot of security Denver communities because they know me. And here it's been a little bit harder because of COVID, and you don't have that personal interaction to really make those connections and be able to, like build up confidence and have those people to reach out to. Just this kind of one-on-one helps a lot. I like this. It makes you feel empowered. But at the end of the day, it's what you do that makes a difference, like what Gail is doing and Sharifa and Rachel. That's what makes a difference. A lot of times we just don't feel like we have it in us to like do a presentation. Even though we've done things, like Gail said, we don't want to look like fools, but we have to try. You don't get beyond that unless you try, and that's how you learn. But yeah, that's what I wanted to ask about, like what helped some of you overcome those struggles, those kind of things. resources if there were?
So there's a lot of research here, especially for the security folks. But like you said, you're from Denver, and while Phoenix is a very small market, we are a very wide market, and there are people in our security, and I'm talking information security and physical security space that I've known for since I've been in Arizona. And they know me from when I was in Detroit teaching at that CISA chapter. So the first thing I would do is get on LinkedIn and of course send me your request to connect so that you can get connected to my network. And then from there, you'll start to see just who the information security and physical security people are here in the Valley. And while we can't meet face to face, even the ISACA chapter has virtual meetings. There's classes that we can take. There's still a lot of ways that we stay connected. So by all means, send me your information on LinkedIn and you can get access to my network and start connecting with people in the security space.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, and Gail, you remind me of something that I noticed a lot was, I would be going to a lot of these events and I would see either junior or fresh faces at one type of event and then more tenured faces at another type of event. And it was like, they weren't, especially for women, right? There would be tenured women at one event and then junior women at another event. It's like, wait a minute, you all need to connect. How do we make a place for you guys to connect? And that was part of what got me passionate about the idea of building this space. And this has been a hard year in many ways. But last year we had, I think, 8 or 9 events. And so we had a lot more events last year. And our goal for next year is to get back to that pace of trying to have one every month or every 6 weeks. Just to create the space to have more of these conversations and for someone like yourself to meet more people.
The Cybersecurity Education Consortium at ASU, the board that I sit on now, I attended the first meeting today. Everyone on that call knew me, and 2 of them were in classes that I taught when they took their certification. So, like I said, we are a very quiet group, but we're very wide. We all intersect at some point here in the Valley. So,
Sorry, Megan. So coming back to the meetings where not all of the juniors are allowed in, or from different backgrounds and whatnot, I've noticed that, say, ISSA meetings or even the cloud security meetings, they're all now during the day where most people work, and they usually look for C-level people to be allowed in. Was that always the case? Like, I know the Southwest Cybersecurity chapter allows, anybody in the security industry to attend. But do you know of any other meetings? I mean, this is a great meeting. Without it, it would be very hard. But is that just a thing that happens here in the Valley?
I've noticed that there was originally only one, but there is now at least 2 or 3 different events style companies that are focusing only to CISOs and senior leadership. So they're kind of wanting to build a business around catering to topics for them. So I have definitely seen those. I've seen the invite only as well. But all of there's, I think, 4 professional chapters. There's the ISSA, ISC squared, ISACA, and okay, there's 3. But those 3 primary ones, those are open to members and non-members. They usually have student pricing as well. So they have 4 quarterly chapter meetings. Those are usually during the day. There are also, I would say, at least a half a dozen security meetups that are listed on meetup.com. There's quite a bit of meetups on meetup.com, and those are not exclusive to senior leadership. Those are content-based, and you'll be able to meet people along those rounds. And I think there used to be a a Wish happy hour, which was sort of the prequel to this, and I think Gail can speak to that a lot more. But that was essentially a really organic list of emails and women in cyber, and it was women in security happy hour, and so they called it Wish, right? And that used to be a lot more active, and that's not as active anymore. But there is the Executive Women's Forum, which kind of came out of the Wish happy hour, and that's primarily focused on security, information security as well, and audit. And so there are other events out there. I would say, the pandemic hit things pretty hard. So where it used to be in Phoenix, there was at least one security event happening a week, if not two. It's gotten to the point where it's probably half a dozen a month. So it has cut back a little bit, but I think people are starting to get their stride with our new world, and those events are picking back up. I'm gonna check the chat here and everything, and we are up on 7 o'clock. But any other questions that people want to share?
Rachel, thank you for hosting the chat and being the facilitator. As always, you are our leader, and we appreciate that from you.
Thank you. I appreciate your leadership as well, Gail, and I'm grateful for everyone who attended and was brave, and for what the content that you shared. You've really accomplished quite a lot with the support of your leadership and given us lots of ideas for things we can spearhead in our organizations too. So thank you everyone for coming, and I think we'll wrap up here.
Thank you, Sharifa. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Rachel. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, bye.
The day's over. Have a great evening.
Yes, have a good evening. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
bye.